Hey guys, Martin here bringing you another Dragon Ball Z Dokkan battle video, and so yes, it is that time once again. I actually didn't do one after the release of Vegeta because I didn't really think much was going to change other than maybe putting Vegeta straight to the top. But now that we've had Goku and HIRUDEGARN release as well on Global, it's time to do another top 10 units on Global tier list. Now, as I say on all of these tier lists, I feel like we kind of just have to get this out of the way at the beginning every time, but this list is entirely based on my personal experience with the game. It's obviously, you know, how I choose to rate units, how I run them on teams, the experiences I have using them in the game. Your opinion might be different, and that's cool. Let me know in the comments with any of the placements that you disagree with. Let me know how you would organize the top 10 list on Global, but just be cool about it, be chill. I swear every time I do one of these lists, we get a bunch of really interesting comments that can spark some interesting conversation. Some people have even made interesting points that have made me rethink some of my placements. But what never works, and I'm sure someone's still going to do it anyway, right? There'll always be someone that doesn't listen to this bit and just does it anyway. But what never works is somebody putting a comment being like, huh, bro, you think X unit is better than Y, you're so dumb, lol. And it's like, yeah, I read that comment and I'm really going to go, this person has a really good point. Like, all the reasons why I explain in the video why I put that unit in a specific place, I guess all of those just mean nothing now, right? So yeah, always annoying, but people will always do that. They're obviously just lonely people that want extra attention, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, if you disagree with my placements on the tier list, just let me know. Never ever take me saying any of that. I like to clap back at people that put stupid comments, but I am more than happy to have discussions with people. If you disagree with my placements, all that kind of stuff, just don't be a dick about it, basically. That's the easiest way I can put it, right? You can completely disagree with my list, but if we can have a fun conversation about it, then I would rather that than someone, you know, be rude. Or even if someone agrees with the list, let me know why, let me know what you think, if there are any tweaks or anything like that. It's always better to have a fun discussion out of these kind of videos than people just putting really short comments about I disagree, and then they don't give any other detail, right? But anyway, this is the top 10 TURs for Global, Easy A's not included. Basically, I would call it top 10 Dokkan Fests, but I do like to include Vegeta, Limit Breaker Vegeta and Super Saiyan 3 Rose, because they are units with Fierce Battle that awaken with 77 medals from a Dokkan event. They have 200% leader skills, and I feel like they are at least comparable to some of these units in the top 10. I mean, they're both still in my top 10, spoiler alert, so obviously that's why I consider, if they'd both, you know, dropped out of the list, I wouldn't be making some argument that they should be considered, right? Because they wouldn't be in the list anyway. Or if one of them would be at number 10 and the other one had dropped out completely, then maybe I would just push them off number 10 and just not include them in the list anymore. But with their performance ranked against some of the TURs, I do think they do deserve to be in the list. But anyway, get the long intro out of the way. As I say, let me know what you guys think down below. Just be cool about it, right? And we can have some fun discussion. But yeah, we're going to jump straight in. Oh, and of course, to point out, before we jump straight in, this is, remember, of course, the top 10 TURs on Global. So obviously not only am I not rating units that are not out on Global, but this is based on my experience playing the game, and of course therefore is only really in relation to events and things that are out on Global. So if a character is good now on Global but gets completely aged out by the anniversary content, then they're still going to be high on this list. And if a unit is pretty good on Global but then gets a massive buff, they're going to be lower on this list than they would potentially be in the future, which is going to be important when we talk about the unit at number 9, who you guys can probably guess, as I've talked about quite a lot, how much they're going to get a glow up during the anniversary. But at number 10, we're going to start off straight away here with Piccolo Jr. Now, I know a lot of people are probably going to disagree with this. I think a lot of people will think that he's quite low, and I think a lot of people probably will think he's better than the unit that I'm putting above him. But I do have to say that just at this point, outside of playing the World Tournament, Piccolo Jr. just ain't him anymore. He can still be good, I guess. It's not to say that he's suddenly become bad, but he just doesn't have good teams that he fits onto. His best team is really either Goku's team, which he doesn't fit super well in as the only extreme unit, or Zamasu's team, which obviously has a lot of better and bigger options now well, not even necessarily better in terms of just 1v1 unit performance, but just like how they gel into the team with links and all this other stuff. So Piccolo Jr. is still a very good unit, at least for now, with like the current global meta, but I feel like he's kind of just dropped in his overall usefulness, which is a little bit unfortunate. And of course, he relies on raw defense. So as these bosses have started to hit harder, he's not going to be tanking, you know, like physical fusions Zamasu or Omega's super attacks, depending on where in the rotation they are and stuff like that, right? So he is down at number 10. Still the World Tournament GOAT, though, for sure, 100%. But yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of, I feel like he's just been relegated to being the World Tournament unit now, and that's kind of it, right? So then at number 9, we have Physical Super Saiyan 3 Rose. Now, again, I feel like some people will disagree with him being over Piccolo Jr., but with him being on teams like Fusion Zamasu, being on teams like with the Physical Rose, we did that video recently using his leader skill and using the new Super Saiyan 3 Goku. I feel like he just has a lot more versatility than Piccolo Jr. now. And of course, you know, once he's transformed, if you got some build up before his transformation and you get like the additional supers, he's dropping attack stats that are similar to Piccolo Jr., but whilst also having guard and being able to tank every single super attack in the game. So, you know, there's a lot of interesting. The only negative for him is that he doesn't have big bad bosses. If you wanted to argue Piccolo Jr. is just above him, right, and switch these guys around, there are a couple of points that I think you could make, so I probably wouldn't argue that point too heavily, but I think he is slightly better. You know, I'm trying not to be biased because you guys know I love Heroes, I love Super Saiyan 3, I love Timebreaker Mask stuff, but trust me, if I was being biased, I would put him higher. But he's the unit that I've talked about that when the anniversary content comes out, he will move up this list because there are so many events where you fight an enemy whose name includes Goku, so you can get the extra chance for a super. And then once he's transformed, you're fighting enemies whose name include, well, Super Saiyan Blue, basically. Goku, Vegeta, Gogeta. So he gets massive buffs from the anniversary. And being a unit that has like Super Saiyan links but doesn't have big bad bosses, he does also work quite well with Broly. So he gets massive buffs from the anniversary. But currently on Global, we have him at number 9. So then at number 8, we have AGL Android 21. She's a unit that could move up in the future, I think, as well, just because the only reason why I think I would put her as low as she is now is because she's just not very good against AoEs. Once you get her transformed into the Margin 21, then she definitely is good enough and can tank like most supers on Global in slot 1, as long as she's taken a normal first and gotten her full buff. So she can be really, really good. Healing on super, is a super class unit, but then obviously has big bad bosses when she transforms. Her leader skill is actually quite good. With the inclusion of Peppy Gals, you can of course have Bulma on there, having transformation boost, crossover, and power absorption. Like, they really snapped with her leader skill. They just dropped this random Android 21, like, new fighters crossover with 3 170 categories and 3 plus 30s. So some of her team builds are quite interesting, and being a crossover unit, there's some cool interactions, like you can build with teams for her and like the Heroes units and some of the, like, you know, random Super Saiyan 3 like Bardock and Vegeta and stuff. So she's very interesting. But if when we move into the anniversary non-AoE meta, I could kind of see her being a little bit better, especially as some of the harder bosses have those big STR phases. But for now, she is at number 8, but still definitely a very, very good unit. So next up we have number 7, which is 23rd World Tournament Goku. He's been dropping down the list a little bit, similarly to Piccolo Jr., but he still has those very important abilities that can make him very good, right? Turn 1, he has guaranteed guard. Then there are a lot of units now that are easier to get their revival and therefore have this guy go into his God mode, basically. And then if you can get that to happen, he is really, really good. The only downside is, whilst his team is still pretty good, you know, he doesn't fit on some of these other big teams with these big Super Saiyan characters. And again, this is like a personal preference for me. It's why I've talked about on the podcast and on the channel and stuff before, why I don't get as hyped for DB Saga stuff. And it's not because I don't like the OG DB Saga. I think it deserves representation in the game. But I don't get hyped for the units releasing because I like to run teams with, like, you know, Super Saiyans, God characters, Super Saiyan 3, all that kind of stuff. So then when these characters drop and they have link sets like this, even if the units are really good, they don't fit into a lot of the team builds that I like to run. So this Goku can still be very good. If you wanted to argue that he's a spot or two higher still, I could potentially see it. But with some of the other units that are now out and that are taking these spaces above him, I feel like he has just dropped down a couple of places in terms of just overall, not just usefulness, but in terms of, like I say, the teams that he's on, versatility and stuff like that. And of course, we all know you can still get absolutely destroyed with this guy if on the second appearance you haven't had anyone revive, and then his chance to guard doesn't proc. And then, yeah, he can take some big damage. So he is coming in for us here at number 7. Then number 6, we have HIRUDEGARN. So we have the newest release, one of, coming in at number 6. Now, again, some people might think he's a bit low, but this is entirely based on just on global. So on global, he has no 200% teams outside of his own, other than STR Cooler, who's irrelevant for all the difficult content now, unfortunately, as much as I loved that unit when it came out. And then Sword of Hope Trunks, who he just doesn't really fit on that team very well. Like 200% time travelers is all well and good, but he doesn't link well with Trunks. You're going to be running double Trunks, which can then make the rotations kind of awkward. But in terms of a unit himself, he does very much suffer from like the LR Omega syndrome, where as a unit himself and his performance, especially on like his best turns, he can be really, really good and deserving of being higher up the list. But I think as it stands currently on global, I just can't see him being better than some of these other units. Now, again, when the anniversary stuff comes out, he's on Broly's 200% leader skill. And he's going to be very good for some of these other events that come out. So I could see a post-anniversary tier list for TURs, especially because most of the big releases for the anniversary are LRs. So it's not like a whole bunch of new TURs are coming out and getting added into this list. But this list will change because units like Super Saiyan 3 Rose, 21, and even this HIRUDEGARN will move up the list once they start to get more partners and better options and events that they can excel in. But for now on global, this is where I'm putting him, number 6. He can still do very well in all the events, but just building a good team for him is really difficult. We did try him out on the Zamasu team earlier. That video will be up on the channel already, so hopefully you guys have seen that. If not, check it out. He definitely does well on that video, but because he's on a double 150 lead, the rest of the team does pretty much do the majority of the work. So he still looks good on that team. But, you know, he's not like doing anything insane or super crazy, or at least didn't get the chance to in that run. So he is at number 6 here for global for me as of now. And like I say, this could change, but, you know, it won't be long till we start getting new events, but who knows what the Golden Week characters are going to be like as well. So this tier list definitely will need updating in just around a month's time. So he's number 6, and then at number 5 we have Super Saiyan Rose. So this guy was a little bit higher in the last tier list, but there's obviously been some new units come out since he released. I think he is super underrated. I will say it all day long. I've said it many times. I say it on the podcast all the time. I know Minato hates him, but I think he's really good and really underrated. People see that first attack stat of the turn that he does, where it's like 2 or 3 million, and just go, oh, don't like that. But then he does like multiple additional attacks, even if they're just normals, which each one of those attacks buffs his stats by 30%, which means he gets easily well over 1 million defense while still having 30% damage reduction. And then he gets off the guaranteed additional super after he's done a bunch of normals, and that's when we start to get into like the 8 to 10 million range, and can still even do another super after that. It all depends how many Rainbow Orbs you've picked up. And then of course once he transforms, then he can hit even harder. But the major difference, which I guess is an interesting one, is he goes from having 60% damage reduction, or 66%, to 0 after he supers, whereas at least in this form he has 60% and then drops to 30 after he attacks, which means when he's having that, you know, he can get up to like 1.5, sometimes even 2 mil, depending on the rotation with support and stuff, defense, with 30% damage reduction. He's just tanking everything on global, and his domain is very useful. As much as people, I know we all sort of hate the way the domains don't overlap and stuff like that, but his domain, with Zamasu on the team, Zamasu's domain makes one of the Zamasus invincible. Rose's domain, and his transformation, makes him an insanely powerful unit, but that buff massively buffs both the Zamasus. Like in that run earlier, if you haven't seen it with HIRUDEGARN on Zamasu's team, we get physical Rose's domain up, and then the tech Zamasus are hitting for like 22 million. So, you know, I think he's very good. He works on the team very well. I tried him out in a bit of anniversary content on the private server in past videos, so check those out. But he certainly can still do reasonably well in the content that will be upcoming for the anniversary. But as I say, this is for, you know, where the current standings are on global right now. And so we have him at number 5. So number 4, I then have God Goku. So God Goku, I still think is a little bit better than Rose, mainly based on his leader skill, right? Rose's leader skill is probably a tick against him just because it's really not that great. Whereas God Goku still has a very, very good leader skill. People have started really dumping on this guy recently, and I don't see it, at least in terms of the global meta, because on global, he's still an absolute GOAT, right? The 2 hardest events in the game that are in with AoE phases, like while they are in, and he's physical, so in those phases you only need to get 3 orbs so he can have the extra dodge chance because he doesn't really need the guard. The 6 orbs of course useful because the guard's guaranteed and you get an additional super, but this guy's still really, really good. Even on JP, I think he is being underrated a little bit nowadays, but this guy's still very, very good. On global, still easily in the upper pantheon here, only just dropping out of the top 3 because of some of these newer units. After, you know, if I spend even more time testing them out, I could maybe put this guy above the unit that we have here at number 3, but I think this guy still is in a very, very solid place. And yeah, I think 4 is fine. If you want to argue him a place or 2 higher or a place or 2 lower, I probably wouldn't have a huge argument, but I definitely don't think he'd be outside. I don't think he'd be outside the top 5 on global currently. So then we have number 3, and number 3 for me is this STR Super Saiyan 3 Goku. Now, some people I think might think that he's too high, but again, this is like my, you know, experience using him. This unit is so good. He's so underrated. I don't get it. Like, his leader skill isn't the best, but I mean, I say that, but then Movie Heroes is still an absolutely cracked team, right? So his team can be really good and really fun. You can still run units like the Orange Piccolo. You get like STR Gogeta on there, and he's a really good link partner. The 5-year fusion still having those crazy guaranteed dodge turns when they transform and stuff like that. But the thing about this guy that really hits me, now that I've got him to link level 10, and I've been trying him out a bit more, most of his links are attack links. So in his base form, right, if he's in slot 2 or 3, he has a 70% chance to dodge. Then he super attacks, and even mine with 1 dupe is doing anywhere between 11 and 14 million attack stats, depending on the rotation, whether he has support, something like that. Then, of course, that has a 50% chance to crit. If he gets an additional, we're talking about another 11 to 14 million attack stat super that has a 50% chance to crit. But then post-super, he's got like 800k defense with a 70% chance to dodge. So even a like million damage super attack, he's not getting killed by it and is potentially just dodging it anyway. Now, the one criticism I do have for this guy is the standby. So when you go into the standby mode, he kind of is like a dodge or die character against these tougher bosses. And of course, we've seen a lot of issues where you go into the standby and the enemy just isn't super attacking on that turn. Now, I don't include this in the way I rate units, so I'm not saying I've put him in this position because of that, but one of the ways you can combat that criticism, of course, is that you can use his standby, and then if the enemy is not supering, or the super's in like slot 3 and you really don't want to float him off and you have a better tank for slot 3 or something like that, you can always reset the app and then not use his active skill. But you guys know I don't like doing that in videos or in like challenge runs and things like that. Obviously, if you're just playing for fun to mess around and try out teams, or you're trying to beat an event because there's a specific mission or something like that, I mean, obviously, you know, you do you at the end of the day. I don't really ever do it in videos and stuff like that. But, I mean, it is a thing you can do. So that is interesting. And the thing about his standby is we've had these turns before where you go into the standby. I think it was the run I did with him against Omega. But if the enemy is super attacking as the first attack of the turn, he auto counters the super, but then once he's countered the super, he has guaranteed dodge. So we had a turn against Omega where like the first attack was the super, and then he was attacking like 4 times after that. So Goku just dodges all of those guaranteed. The Dragon Fist, whilst it's not like a crazy, you know, it's not like dropping a super fully overcharged physical LRs from the 8-year Spirit Bomb, but it does hit very hard, and it's a guaranteed super counter. But the thing is, even though it's, I guess it's a bit weird and maybe kind of disappointing because you're ignoring part of his kit, but like if he didn't have the standby, I think I would still really like this Goku just because the big attack stats, really high raw defense, 70% chance to dodge. Like, I think the animations are decent enough. Like, I like his super attack. I know people are disappointed with the quality of the Dragon Fist, but I think most of the Dragon Fist animation is actually fine. It's just parts of the Dragon, like PNG, right, that aren't particularly great. But I think he's really good. His standby does also support allies with ki and defense, which can be really good. You can have units that would take maybe 10 to 20k from normals will then take double digits with him on the rotation in standby, which can be very useful. So yeah, I have Goku at number 3 for global. He can absolutely destroy Zamasu and Omega. He can nullify Zamasu's super attack in the physical phase as well, which is awesome, especially because his nullification animation is him like reeling from a punch and then like straightening up with the smirk on his face, and physical fusion Zamasu is him flying at you doing a punch with the giant goo arm. So it's super satisfying when you get the super nullification because it just flows together really well. But yeah, I like this Goku. He's number 3 on global as far as I'm concerned. Let me know what you guys think of him down below if you've gotten much chance to use him. I know a lot of people won't have summoned for him, but do you think he's too high? Do you think he's too low? Let me know what you think down below, because I know some people might argue, but at number 2, we still have Limit Breaker Vegito. Now, Limit Breaker Vegito on global, I think still has an argument to be at number 1. Because the reason I've always put him this high, and the thing I always say about him is, no other TUR in the game does what he does on turn 1. Because we're talking about when you're running these units on their proper teams with their setups. Because I see people say like, oh, well, what if you're running him not on a heroes team? Then he's not good at all. It's like, well, but then why would I run him not with the allies that he needs, like, to get his passive active? That's like saying like, oh, you know, God Goku's not very good because I'm running him on a full extreme team so he doesn't get his intro animation. You know what I mean? Like, I run him on the teams that he works on, and when he's putting in his performance, he's really, really good. That's why it's difficult to rate HIRUDEGARN, because HIRUDEGARN is really good, and if you put him on an ideal team, his performance is great, but on global, he just doesn't really have that crazy ideal team, especially not one that actually gives him his full leader skill. But Vegito, like, if you have him on rotation with Super Saiyan 4 Vegito, he's dropping like 13 to 14 million attack stats while tanking basically everything for double-digit damage, potentially critting, potentially triple supering. I mean, there's just not a lot of units that do what he does. And I mean, the thing is, you could almost, I say, make arguments that on global, he actually still is number 1. Because the unit that we're going to talk about at number 1, which should be pretty obvious at this point, I feel like is better than Vegito in most ways, but in short content where you just want to go crazy on turn 1, I would argue that Vegito is better. So it's certainly very interesting. Now, when the anniversary comes, for those of you who are the heroes, I don't know, well, I know there's not really anyone that hates heroes in our community, because we love heroes, we push the heroes agenda, but any of you out there who are, for whatever reason, sick of the heroes glazing, don't worry, when the anniversary stuff comes out, this is a unit that drops down in the tier list, because of course, once we get to past the first 6 turns, we lose that damage reduction and crit chance, and that's when he can start taking some really big damage from these enemy supers, and the heroes team overall starts to struggle. Because again, like on global, having to run him with heroes allies doesn't really matter, because on global the heroes team can still steamroll through basically all of the content, right? So it doesn't matter as much. Whereas when the anniversary comes, the heroes team, so many of the units on that team that aren't in like the top tier, like this guy, Rose, Super Saiyan 4 Vegito to a certain extent, they just get completely like power crept by the anniversary content. And then that in turn affects Vegito, because he's trying to carry the entire team on his back, but you can't beat some of these slightly longer anniversary events quickly enough. And then he becomes unable really to be put in slot 1. And then one of the issues with the Heroes team over the years has kind of always been, when it comes to difficult content, they don't have a really, really good slot 1 unit. And so once he loses the ability to be in slot 1 against these tougher bosses from the anniversary, then you get into real like dicey situations there. So I think at the moment, I would say number 2, with still an argument to be at number 1. But that, of course, leads us into who is number 1, which is the Tech Vegeta. Now, a lot of people don't like his team on global, but it still is really crazy. Like, the King Vegeta is probably the best banner unit in the game at the moment. And those two together go absolutely crazy. His team still is very good because obviously he has Super Saiyans as his secondary category, which I think a lot of people forget, right? He's not just a Vegeta family team. You've got units like the LR Super Saiyans. Now, God Goku, of course, on a double Vegeta team doesn't get his intro animation, which I always forget, of course, that this guy is extreme. But he's just very, very good. On turn 1, he's tanking everything, right? Now, your HP can be an issue. If he's on turn 2 and you start the turn on lower HP, he's not getting anywhere near like the stat buffs that he would get. But unless you're getting very unlucky in the first or second turn, this guy usually has incredibly high stats. He has the infinite stacking on super. And then, of course, if you have an ally whose name includes Goku or an enemy whose name includes Goku, which is very easy to do on his team, he can get all these extra supers as well. Now, his starting attack stat on turn 1 might not be the craziest, but it does depend on links, and he gets a lot of extra buff from support. Because he gets so much extra attack when attacking, he benefits greatly from support. Like, without a support unit on the rotation, you can see him go from doing like 3 or 4 million attack stats to doing anywhere from 6 to like 9 on the first turn. Like, there's that big of a difference depending on the links and the support. Because he gets so much of a buff on attack. So he can still be very, very good even pre-transformed. Defensively, of course, pre-transformed, he's just very, very strong, especially once you've got a few supers off. It's not difficult to easily get him up to like 500, 600, 700k defense within the first couple of turns. So very, very strong defensively. And then, of course, his transformation condition, very easy to get. 18% or more HP from turn 3. I think I've only had one time I've ever used this guy where he was below the threshold, and that's because, you know, I almost got killed at the end of the previous turn and survived with like 5% HP or something. But there's barely been any other times outside that one instance where I haven't been able to transform him when I wanted to. And then once the Super Saiyan Vegeta comes out, then of course he is very, very strong defensively, has the guard, very powerful. As the enemy gets lower on health, the harder he hits. But because he can do a bunch of additional attacks, especially if he's been hit first in slot 1, those proc during the turn, right? So if he attacks the enemy and puts them below another one of these thresholds and then attacks again, he gets the extra attack buff. So that's really, really good. He has the active skill that does damage, guaranteed crit, and then all of the attacks for the rest of the turn are crits. So he can just pump out an insane amount of damage. And the thing is with this guy, like I said, you could almost make an argument that in the current global meta, he's not quite as good as he could be, or maybe not as good as Vegito. But once the anniversary stuff starts coming out, this guy pretty much is solidified as being number 1. Because not only is he great in those longer events, there's a bunch of enemies whose name includes Goku at the start of these events, so he can be getting off those additional supers. And then he gets a bunch of buffs for his team, like Broly, Gogeta, the Easy A for STR Vegito. So he kind of solidifies his spot. But we are talking about only on global. But I do think he is number 1. I think there are arguments for making Vegito number 2. But as I've said, a lot of people have arguments why they wouldn't put Vegito as high because of his team builds and allies and stuff like that. But I think on global, that does not matter as much. So Vegito is definitely still right near the top. I think if we were going to separate them into actual tiers rather than just like 1 to 10, you could probably argue that on global, Vegeta and Vegito are on the same tier, but I would still put Vegeta just slightly ahead of Vegito. So if we jump over to the actual full list, I think I've got the more zoomed out one. Is it here? There we go. So there is the full tier list. Going in reverse order, we have Piccolo Jr. at 10, Super Saiyan 3 Rose at 9, Android 21 at 8, 23rd World Tournament Goku at 7, HIRUDEGARN at 6, Physical Rose at 5, God Goku at 4, STR Dragon Fist Goku at 3, Limit Breaker Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta at 2, and then the Transforming Big Bang Attack Vegeta at number 1. So, as I say, this is my top 10, technically Dokkan Fest, right? But TUR'S on global as of right now. Like I said at the beginning, it's all just my opinion. Feel free to disagree with me down below in the comment section, but at least make the comments interesting. If you disagree, let me know why. Let me know whose positions you would swap, or just give me your full actual top 10 list. Let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Master Ningen. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the links down below for the Discord and the merch store, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.